Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everyone feeling out there?
Yes.
Let's start off with a show of hands. I want to do a little check-in here. If you were asleep by 10 o'clock or in your room by 10, raise your hand. Oh, wow. If you were asleep by midnight, raise your hand. If you were asleep by 1 a.m., raise your hand. After 2. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Transform Day. Is it day 2 or day 3? I don't know what that counting is. Day 3, welcome. My name is Adam Posner. I am the founder of NHP Talent Group, a boutique recruiting firm based out of New York. I am also the host of the top global career podcast, The Podcast. And I am joined by these two incredible ladies. I will allow them to do a proper introduction. We'll start with Ariana Moon.
Hello, nice to see everyone here. Super excited to be here. I'm Ariana. I'm the VP of Talent Planning and Acquisition at Greenhouse Software. If you're not familiar with Greenhouse, we are an all-together hiring platform. We've got about 7,000 customers globally that use us for inclusive, purposeful hiring. A little bit about me. I've been at the company for about 10 years, helped it 10x in size, which has been a really fun journey. And I hail originally from New York City. So any New Yorkers in the room? Yeah, there we go.
Me?
But I am currently a Las Vegas transplant, so I'm very proud of that, which makes it really easy for me because to come to these things, especially because I'm expecting right now. So doing a little bit of 2 jobs right now.
Yes, welcome.
Awesome.
Cori.
And hi, everyone. My name is Cori Faro. I lead our global acquisition team at Okta, which is an identity management company. I've been at the company for about 4 years and kind of worked my way up to owning the global team right now. I'm from the Bay Area, so from the East Bay, but I actually live in Denver with my family right now. So I've been in Denver for the past 3 years. I got one. So yeah, I'm really happy to be here. Thanks
Well,
for having
awesome.
me.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to everyone out there for spending time with us this morning. Today, we are going to talk about future-proofing and elevating the candidate experience. Are we going to talk about AI? I think we have to at some point. But we're going to try to lift up the hood and really get into it because candidate experience is critical, especially those first touch points. So we're going to talk about how to elevate it, how to ensure a seamless candidate experience, a smooth journey. Listen, there's always going to be bumps in the road. There's going to be X factors. But how do teams pull it all together to create a seamless experience? So let's jump in right now. And I want to start with talking about what's working, what's not working here at a high level, whether it be within your organization or some of the other things. What are some of those key challenges that we're facing? Cori?
I think, first of all, I don't think anyone has nailed candidate experience. I think it's one of these organic things that as a company you have to always keep top of mind because what candidates needs also change. So we've seen the market shift quite a bit in the past 4 years where candidates were really in demand and then sometimes they're not depending on the job market. So I think you have to change it and adapt your tactics. I also think about, for me, running a global team and hiring across 15 countries in the world, a candidate experience in India might look different than it does in America. And so how do we adapt our culture to make sure that we're globally consistent but locally relevant? So I think a lot about that. The other thing is that I think the most important thing for me when I look at candidate experience is consistency. So if we're talking about Okta's values, I want to make sure that a candidate feels those values through every single step of the process. And that even comes today when you're hearing me speak. Okay, Cori at Okta, what does she stand for? What is she talking about? Then if you go to our website, does this website mirror what I'm expressing that Okta is? And then every single person that they meet throughout the journey. So I think consistency and knowing what a candidate wants in different markets are the 2 top things that I think a lot about in managing a global team.
Quick, fast follow on that. You speak about global enterprise organizations. How does the tone change, for example, on a disposition email or if you're passing on a candidate? How does that tone change from region to region? You have certain things you have to consider?
I think you always have to consider local nuances. I'm also just a big fan of picking up the phone. I don't really believe in if someone has invested so much time in you and your company and giving themselves, I think you owe them a phone call. and you owe them a reason, because something else I think about is even if they're not fit for Okta today, they will be in the future. I think every candidate is a good candidate. I think it comes down to timing, experience, and the stage of company you're in.
I think that's critical as well, because if you think about most roles, there's usually only one open position. And as you get up the ladder in the interview process, you might have 3 or 4 great candidates, but you can only choose one.
Right.
So that experience is critical for the next role. Ariana, what's happening over at Greenhouse?
All right, so candidate experience. I agree with so much of what you said. I think at the core, when you think about whether it's candidate experience or some other experience, when you think about a human experience, I think I go down to the fundamentals of effective communication and expectation setting. So whether you're a vendor and you're trying to implement a solution with a client, whether you're an employee kind of onboarding at a company or a candidate, like that expectation setting with the team around you is really critical for determining the experience that you have. And so in the context of recruiting, I feel like there are 2 big dynamics that make precisely that super hard. So the first dynamic is that, recruiting as kind of like more traditionally a funnel-driven line of work, a numbers-driven game, there's a lot of volume. So you got all these interested prospects and candidates against one recruiter. And so, and now that's being amplified because the candidate market is using AI to kind of mass apply to jobs. So if recruiters are not picking up, new technologies to help them with that volume, it becomes impossible to do great expectation setting, which very often entails some form of personalization. So I think that that's one big dynamic. I think the other dynamic, specifically in recruiting, is I feel like a lot of folks like to compare recruiting to sales. Like, hey, it's funnels driven. At the same time, there's aspects of it that are kind of antithetical to sales, because in sales, you're kind of trying to bring in the dollars, you're trying to bring in revenue for the company, but in recruiting, it's really the business of rejection. You just asked about disposition emails.
We give a lot of bad news all the time.
Right,
and learning
way
how to
more
give
than
bad
good news.
The ability to give bad news is tough, and you have to learn how to do it the right way.
Yeah, and so if you think about those 2 dynamics, like super high volume against a small recruiting team, and then you have a lot of the communication that you have to do effectively is around a really hard topic, which is, hey, you're not getting the job. That's a lot of places to get communication wrong, but also right. And so the question in today's world of recruiting is how are you going to use the right processes and technologies to help you manage those 2 dynamics effectively and set good expectations?
I have a note on the recruiters
Please.
being sellers, because I 100% agree with that. I started my career actually as an SDR and then went into sales and then into recruiting. And I think there's a lot of parallels. And in sales, if there's any salespeople out there, they talk about some of the best sellers know how to qualify a deal and get out early. So the best sellers know when the customer is not right for that person and they get out of the deal. They do not waste sales cycles. And so I think very similarly about recruiters. A good recruiter can talk to a candidate to make sure that needs are met on both ways. They can assess it before they even go into selling mode, because it is about finding the right person at the right time, at the right stage of their career. And so the best recruiters that do that the soonest and can either move a candidate forward or they can reject them in a way that we can then keep connected with them and bring them back later are the best recruiters in my book.
I'm just going to double down on that for a moment here. The training of the recruiters is essential. So you bring on the right recruiters who could recognize as quickly as possible if that candidate is a fit or not, because that's essential in the candidate experience. You're not stringing somebody along.
Yes.
You're giving them the bad news as soon as possible and ripping the Band-Aid off.
And you're not selling something that's not there.
You're not forcing them or pushing them
You have
into
to keep
something.
it authentic and honest to what the opportunity actually is, and that's calling out the good and the bad. I don't want to sell anyone anything that's not real. And so to me, again, it's bringing the whole candidate experience to life through every single part of their journey, not just the recruiter interactions.
Let me ask you both this. How are you using technology or enabling your recruiters to use technology to say, hey, Adam, unfortunately, we're in the final round, you didn't make it, but we have potential 3 other roles. We may have something at a sister organization. Is that something that's incorporated into your current process?
So I'm going to slightly not answer your question.
You could slightly do that, please.
Because I think there's something that comes before hey, this is the technology that we use, especially in the context of AI. And this goes back to expectation setting with candidates. So one of the things that we prioritized was, hey, there's a lot of noise in the market right now on the candidate side, on the employer side, because employers are being pummeled with all these like amazing AI solutions that will solve all our problems, and we don't know which one to pick. And a lot of folks on both sides are trying different technologies to help them kind of land the job of their dreams. What a lot of companies are not doing are being transparent about what they are trying or implementing into their hiring processes. So one of the first things that we did is we actually wrote out a guideline that says, hey, here is how we use AI in our interview process. And here are our guidelines for how you can and can't use AI in our interview process. Now, can we prove when someone is using AI to help them with their interviews? We cannot, but the ethos of that policy is really the same, which is AI or not, we don't support misrepresentation or plagiarization in the process.
Right. Represent your true self regardless, irrespective of the technology.
Right. And so we're really looking for that two-way accountability, we call it, and that authenticity in a world that we know and acknowledge is enabled by AI. And so I think that's a really key piece of expectation setting, to first say, before we go into the tools, like, here are the tools that we are trying out.
No, I completely agree. And obviously, Okta being an identity management company, we think about this a lot, is making sure that folks are who they say that they are. And so there are things that you can implement throughout the process too, just some little hacks in terms of cameras on. So if you have a Zoom interview and it's not face-to-face, your camera has to be on. You can't wear headphones, because a lot of times you can even have people speaking into their headphone giving answers, and no blurred backgrounds. So identity management is coming for all of us, whether we like it or not. And so it is a big part of this. And there are a lot of tools and tech that can help kind of mitigate the risk there too. But those are just a couple hacks that we actually implement in our process today.
So, Cori, how do you train your recruiters to handle situations like that where, listen, I think a candidate is using an AI tool for the interview process. How do you remove that conflict? How do you train your recruiters to have those kind of awkward conversations?
Yeah, first of all, I think good recruiters are always used to having awkward conversations, just in the
Story
business
of my
we're
life.
in,
Yes,
right?
thank you.
But I actually agree with what Ariana had mentioned, is that it's all around expectation setting. So if the recruiters are doing a great job at the onset, telling a candidate how to prepare, what to prepare for, what they can expect, then it becomes a much different conversation in the fact that, hey, we told you your camera has to be on and that there was no headphones. This conversation isn't going to work for us at this time. That's much different than not setting the right expectation up front and then having kind of this awkward interaction with the candidate. So again, I think it comes down to clear communication on the onset about what's expected on both ends throughout the process.
Ariana, is there ever a point of over-communicating or too many touch points in the process?
Is there ever a point where you're over-communicating? That's not the thing that keeps me up at night, frankly.
No.
But the thing that keeps me up at night is, are we being efficient about all of our personalized touch points? Because I think when people think about personalization, and personalization is a huge part of what dictates your experience, right? I think there tends to be this line of thought that personalization is like, that means the human has to do everything. I would actually disagree with that. I think you can use templates and processes and technology and automation to provide personalized experiences. So for example, one of the things that we're very upfront about doing, whenever anyone enters our interview process, we do a lot of, we kind of push a lot of information around what someone can expect based on which role they're applying for. So it could be things that are generalized, like our AI guidelines, or the fact that we use different technology partners like BrightHire in our interview process. And so those are the things that we share with everyone, and there are templates for that. But then there are also different templates that are personalized to, hey, if you apply to a product management job, like here's what you can expect in the process, and here are the people you can expect to meet along the way. If you're literally typing that up every single time, that's not efficient. And so the thing that again, like I would focus more on is, are each of our touch points deliberate, and are they providing a good sense, like a tailored experience to that candidate while being as automated as possible?
Interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to double down on that, and that I think the great thing about technology is that it can help us be frictionless too with candidates and create a really smooth experience, but also for our hiring teams, because our hiring managers and interviewers
just gonna
are
go there.
just as important to the experience, if not more important than a recruiter. I like to think, I know my team makes some memorable relationships throughout the process, but usually a candidate remembers who they interviewed with and who they're gonna work with in the job. So it's actually just as important that you all are connected. And so in the spirit of that, I think about, okay, how can my team help them leverage technology to make it easier for them, i.e. interview writing or AI writing, to take notes for you so that the interviewer can really concentrate on the conversation and peeling the onion, asking really thoughtful questions. So I think of AI in that way and making it more personalized experience for the candidate, because you're removing the friction from the interviewers and hiring managers.
So we've been talking a lot about the recruiters, and now certainly we need to talk a little bit about the hiring managers. Question for both of you. How do you keep your recruiting team and the hiring managers in lockstep with a synchronized candidate experience? Because it's seamless, right? There's multiple players involved. How do we keep everyone on the same page?
I just listened to a hot take just earlier today, I forget which session, where there was like this future being depicted around how recruiters are really like the admin part of the hiring process, and technology will automate them away, so it enables the hiring managers to really be the ones that manage the process themselves. I think we've all heard a version of this. I think where I pause is the role of a recruiter I see as more of like an objective player in the whole process, to be able to advocate for the candidate too. Like the incentive of a hiring manager might not always align with creating a great experience, because hiring managers want their hires yesterday. So they're gonna move as fast as possible. They might not close the loop. They, might on their end ghost candidates just as candidates are ghosting us. But the recruiter is really kind of someone that can oversee the quality control of the actual recruiting process and really care about that. So I think like at the end of the day, like the roles of the recruiting team and the hiring team, while very much in sync, they do play different parts, because if we're all in this team sport together, it's most effective if we have our individual focuses and we do, what the teams are best at doing. So I don't necessarily sign up for the line of thought that recruiters will simply go away because the technology will be so good that hiring managers won't need that partner. I think the technology will allow us to do less repetitive things so that we can be better partners in the long run.
Right, and my thought is using the technology to be more efficient, to give us more time for the human side of recruiting. Things we could automate: sourcing, screening, and scheduling, to give us recruiters more time to have the human conversations, to really understand the candidate's motivation, to dig into role, to dig into the company, and really get into it. So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about employer branding. Employer branding sits over the whole candidate experience, bringing it all together, wrapping it up, and really the outbound facing brand of why somebody wants to work at your organization. Cori, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what thought process, what goes into it, and how much work and how critical it is to really clearly define the employer brand in regards to the entire candidate experience.
Employer brand is something I'm very passionate about, so you might have me go on a rant right now.
Let's do it.
So again, I think of the same mentality of globally consistent and locally relevant. So at Okta, we think a lot about, okay, well, what are we doing at a macro level? We want to keep everyone's identity safe. We want everyone to freely use any technology. And so how does that then relate to people? And our tagline is, it's possible, it's Okta. So then I think about, okay, this is what we're doing at a macro level. Then how does that relate to every single person that interacts with our brand? And so we have some consistency there, but I'm also a really big fan of just the organic nature of employee brand, and the fact that for me, working in my remote office in Denver is much different experience than my recruiters on the ground in India 4 days a week. And so I want everyone to envision what it's like, no matter what level they are, what location, what would it be for that person to work at Okta? So I think those organic, we try to do a lot of organic videos, touring the office, what is a day in the life of different levels throughout the organization, Because again, I want to sell a candidate what they will really experience. So that comes again from the first interaction with our brand, which is usually our career site, to what it'll be for them actually onboarding and offboarding. It's the whole employee
Critical.
life cycle.
Ariana, if Greenhouse wants to attract the top 1% of talent out there, you need to do what 99% of the other companies are not doing. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little secret sauce about
Secret
employer branding.
sauce. Yes, I'll solve all your problems.
That's why everyone's here. Right? They want the good stuff. They want the
I'm
alpha.
going to sit up in my chair because I really like this topic of employer brand. So I think when you're talking about, because you initially asked the question, like how important is employer brand, right? If you're talking about candidates that are genuinely trying to find an opportunity that culturally and professionally aligns with what they're looking for versus like, candidates that are mass applying, employer brand is super important. I think the other dynamic that we're seeing, which makes it really important, is we are in this world where we have like 4 to 5 different generations interacting together in the workforce today, from baby boomers and soon to be Gen Alpha. And there was this really interesting report that came out recently by the World Economic Forum that said, hey, like when it comes to the things that Gen Z want, they want access, not ownership. They want side hustles. They care about different things. And so if you're an employer trying to market towards that demographic, you have to be very tuned into what is it that demographic is looking for, and what is it that you can offer that will speak to them as an employee, as an employer. So one of the things that I think is like a really key part of employer brand is what is your employee value proposition, EVP. And that's a very fancy way of saying what is the promise or the commitment that you make to both candidates and employees on what you are offering as an employer. It should essentially answer the question, what's in it for me to work at Greenhouse or Okta? And what is that experience like? What can I expect if I contribute my efforts and my time? At the same time, an EVP can help companies by acting as a filter. Like when I think about an EVP, I don't think just about advertising to as many people as possible because you want as many people to kind of like pummel you with their applications. No, in some ways, a really great EVP needs to also act as a filter because every organization will have a different culture and a different set of things that they prioritize. So for example, at Greenhouse, one of the things that we say as part of our EVP is, we reward great performance and we view inclusion and allyship as a strength. Like that, these are not things that every organization might say. And these are things that we honed in on by doing a lot of employee focus groups so that it's unique to the employee voice. So if every company has their own unique employee value proposition and it's well articulated, then candidates and employees can opt in to whether, like, is this the right organization for me based on what's being prioritized?
Thank you, that's great. Cori?
I was going to say, I also think about it as a joint commitment. So an employer brand, to Ariana's point, is what's in it for you to work at Okta, but then the candidate also knows the expectations of working at Okta when they come in. So it's a joint commitment. And so again, it goes into the experience, the over communication, and ensuring a candidate really gets what they signed up for when they start at the company.
I'll add one more thing because
Go for it.
We got to connect everything back to money.
Yes.
There was a really interesting study that formerly CEB, now Gartner, published around an employer brand, and they said companies with really strong employer brands or really strong EVPs see a 50% reduction in the compensation premium in attracting candidates, and they also see up to 11% point decrease in annual turnover. And so if you take like an average mid-sized business, the projection that they listed was you can save that business like $13 million annually in not having to deal with disengagement and attrition spikes and things like that. So in that way, that employer brand is also super important, not just on the recruiting side, but on the retention side.
Yeah.
When you could equate the ROI to it, you have a stronger case to management. You have a stronger case why to invest into the entire experience. So we're nearing the end here. And what we like to do on this panel is take out our crystal ball. We're going to take out our crystal ball here, and we're going to make a prediction over here. Cori, where do you see the biggest shift in the next 1 to 2 years in candidate experience? Or is there going to be a big shift? Is it technology? Is it going to be storytelling related?
I do think, as we talked about with AI, implementing that in a way that helps helps create less friction in the process. I do think that if you're not thinking about that within your company, then I think that you're behind. I don't think it's a silver bullet. I really don't. I think, again, to Ariana's point, you still need the human interaction. But for me, again, it comes back to the companies that can quickly articulate their employee value proposition, what's in it for the candidate, and have a mutual agreement to get the best talent for where they are in their company are the ones that are going to win.
Ariana?
The thing that first came to mind, and I know there are a bunch of vendors here kind of tackling this space, is agentic AI. That's a really interesting space where you have AI systems that are designed to operate autonomously with minimal human intervention, basically like pursue outcomes and goals, by leveraging LLM and machine learning and all that great stuff. Super like interesting stuff. I think the thing that is yet to be determined is like, who does this fit? Because I don't think like an AI agent is a one-size-fits-all solution, especially in talent acquisition. Like, it's a very different model if you're hiring for thousands of warehouse workers and you need them by tomorrow versus you're running an executive search and you want it to be super high touch and personalized in order to engage like the right candidates. And so like in this world where agentic AI is really becoming like the new hype subset of AI, like what sort of, where it's gonna go or where it's gonna be most useful is the thing that I'm super interested in.
Are we gonna go into overtime and talk about agentic AI over here? We are wrapping up, and before we close out and before I thank my two incredible guests here, we have a question from the audience, from Anonymous. Anonymous, raise your hand. How are you using skills and skill-based hiring to improve the candidate experience?
I think a lot about skills and skills-based hiring actually with silver and bronze medal analysts. So if I have, just to use myself, if I have a recruiter role open and I've interviewed 15 people, it's like, what are the common skills within the feedback that I can take and delineate, and then start to look at things like competencies, interview questions to help speed up the process moving forward. We also at Okta, we're hiring around 1,700 people this year. And a lot of our different business units are running parallel searches. So what are the commonalities, also the skills between the different searches? For example, if we're hiring a software engineer in one part of the business, software engineer in the other part, how can we then look at common skills and then create more of a pooled hiring process for efficiency across all disciplines? So I think there's a real opportunity there to identify different skills across candidates and across jobs in different locations too.
For us, I feel like skills-based hiring is kind of like our bread and butter, because Greenhouse, if you're not familiar, is a structured hiring platform. And so, when there was a lot of this conversation and hype around skills-based hiring, there was a part of me that was like, well, what was everyone doing before? I thought we were beyond just looking at a resume and then hiring someone. So
that's it, right?
We all have different skills.
Right. So there hasn't been that significant of a change for us internally, but we have applied a little bit more focus around, hey, like, to what portion do we want to hire for potential versus like verify existing skill sets, et cetera, et cetera.
Awesome. We have time for one more question in the audience. Anybody?
How about the guy who was up since 2? Do you have a question for us?
Joel Lalji, everybody, the real recruiter, realist recruiter. Realistic, real. Hold on. We're going to mic you up. You're not that loud.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of job seekers that are looking, using more and more AI to, apply to more jobs, right? And if we're using AI on the same side as recruiters, are we going to get to a point where it's just 2 AI agents interviewing with each other? And like how?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and so
yes.
So then what does that candidate experience look like though? Like how do you avoid that?
It's a good question. Who wants to take a shot first?
I'll take a shot because this is just the reality that we live in. Yes, I think that is happening, especially as, on the employer side, we're all trying to figure out what's going to make us more efficient. And the favorite part to make more efficient is top of funnel, because that's where the volume is the highest. I do think this will lead to more like, hey, the ways that we used to do things. So for example, I was just talking to another TA leader about like, hey, we're seriously bringing back in-person interviewing for like these kinds of roles. And then there'll be more conversations around like, well, what is it that the human can specifically do the best in the interview process? So for example, one of the things that my team is looking at is we put out the question, we still do recruiter screens, but what is the definition of a good recruiter screen in this age of AI? So that is an active problem statement we're kind of like brainstorming right now, and it's leading to some really interesting conversation around like, what do you want to focus on in that initial conversation?
I'm gonna go back to this recording because I think we have a topic for next year. I think we have something here. Cori, you wanna give this one a shot before we wrap up?
I think to your point, it's going to be unavoidable. I do think it's going to be, to some extent, a battle of the bots at the front end of the funnel. And so, again, to Ariana's point, I think how can you, as an organization, bring the human element? You know, so actually having folks reach out, maybe doing we are starting in person too, especially in certain markets where there is more face-to-face interaction. So again, I just encourage that when your recruiter or job seeker actually gets somebody on the phone or on a Zoom or in person, that they really focus on skills for the job, being honest, and have that more authentic human experience, because AI can't take that away. And I think that's going to be the differentiator with certain companies too, attracting talent.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the audience here. Before we wrap up, Cori, where could folks find you? Where could they connect? Where could they learn more?
They can find me just wandering around here for the rest of the day. I know that's super ambiguous, but I will be here. I'll be at the Greenhouse booth later on too at 1 for our podcast. So absolutely come find me, and I'll look forward to meeting you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Ariana?
You can find me at the snack station. That and our Greenhouse booth is over there. So please pay us a visit. If you have not yet already, we'd love to chat with you.
Thank you, ladies, and thank you everyone for spending time with us this morning. Enjoy your last day at Transform, and we will see you hopefully at the after party tonight.
Cool.
Thanks to Greenhouse. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
All right.
Have a great day.